Good evening, everyone joining us on Zoom, Facebook Live, and YouTube. Bonsoir et bienvenue à toutes et à tous qui nous joignent ce soir, que ce soit sur Zoom, sur Facebook, ou sur YouTube. I want to welcome you all to Heritage Talks, brought to you by the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue à Heritage Talks, présenté par le Réseau du patrimoine anglophone du Québec. My name is Glenn Patterson, and I'm the digital media specialist and one of the project directors at Quan. Helping me on the Zoom today is my colleague Jody Robinson. I just want to say Heritage Talks is made possible thanks to the generous support of the Zeller Family Foundation, Canadian Heritage, and the Townshippers Foundation. Just before continuing, I want to tell you all a little bit about our organization. Quan empowers and advocates for Quebec's English-speaking heritage sector. We have several hundred members across the province, from the Pontiac to the Lower North Shore and Magdalen Islands, and everywhere in between. Our members include small museums, archives, libraries, historical societies, and anyone interested in the history and heritage of Quebec's diverse English-speaking communities. Quan is a non-profit membership-based organization that's open to all, regardless of residence or language. For everyone joining live right now, we always do this during our online events. We're running a special promotion. So for the length of this broadcast, we're giving 30% off the cost of an individual year-long membership. So for $20, you can become a member of Quan, which among other perks comes with a subscription to our beautiful quarterly magazine, Quebec Heritage News. This is filled with wonderful editorials, articles on local history and heritage topics, book reviews, and news from our network. So if you want to join and not worry about renewing for a while, we're also reducing the cost of a 3-year membership from $75 down to $60 during tonight's broadcast. So if you're on Zoom, just send us, myself or Jody, a message in the chat box to claim the discount, and we'll get in touch with you after. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can send us a message there or to our email, which is home@qahn.org. So among our many other activities, each year Quan runs a free public lecture series called Heritage Talks that takes place both online and at in-person events across the province. This year's theme is extra special for me as it's all about musical heritage in Quebec's English-speaking communities, something I've been interested in for the last 2 decades. In my travels throughout the province for Quan, as well as for my academic research, I've seen firsthand how central musical culture is in bringing communities together and expressing their senses of belonging and rootedness in this province. So whether at a crowded downtown venue, a rural kitchen party or square dance, in lumber and hunting camps, or in one of Quebec's many historic English-speaking churches, for me, musical heritage has and continues to form part of the backbone of our cultural vitality. So I want to invite you to check out all the other great talks we have coming up later on in our 2026 series. So tonight is our second talk of the season, and I'm thrilled to welcome some of the team at ARCMTL. So Louis Rastelli has been the director of ARCMTL since 2013. He's a cultural historian, writer, and DJ since the 1990s, and he's been involved in many heritage and arts projects in Quebec and Canada. Delilah Edouard Williams is an art and cultural curator dedicated to elevating contemporary emerging BIPOC artists and fostering inclusive, community-engaged arts programming. Through her experience in creative workshop programming, she actively works to amplify collective narratives and ensure that underrepresented voices have the space to shape and tell their own stories. Chloe Martin is a music educator with a background in music history and is also an event programmer with ARCMTL. They are the organizer of Owning Our Histories, celebrating DIY archives from queer and BIPOC MTL, an ongoing ARCMTL series. Welcome Chloe, Delilah, and Louis to Quan Heritage Talks.
Thank you so much. And thanks to QHN for collaborating with us on this series. It's not the first time, but it's always a pleasure to be able to reach a different audience. And also thank you to the Government of Canada. We acknowledge the support of the Government of Canada for this amazing Owning Our Histories project. I think this is the 7th event We've really had a great time being able to bring together different people from Montreal who are working on special history projects or DIY archives and histories. Basically, it's all about taking charge of telling our own histories ourselves for our communities. In our case, as an introduction, here we are at the ARCMTL Archive Center. I won't give the grand tours, it would take over an hour. But our mandate, starting in 1998, we were founded by a group of independent artists and publishers who felt a need to set up a new organization to both promote and preserve the work that independent artists do in Montreal. It involved very much into a community center, because a community archive, because we really get a sense, the fact that actual artists, writers, and people involved in music scenes and so on work here, develop the projects with us. We really are doing things by and for independent artists. Some might say, why do this when there's already the BANQ and the National Library and so on? Well, the short version is that they are sort of not very well in touch with these sorts of scenes. They don't tend to be very active in communities. They're sort of institutions that sit there and receive material that people have the means to send over. But there's something different about a community-based archive that works with the community to document and promote these communities. As far as places, very early on when we started the archive, we realized that among the material we wanted to collect and save: publications, community newspapers, actual artworks, art prints, music. We have a massive music collection, a lot of independent self-produced publications and albums and demo tapes and all this kind of thing. But we also very early on decided to document and gather collections of ephemera. Ephemera is a term in archiving that refers to material that was never meant to last very long. It's ephemeral. So a postcard or a flyer or a poster for a concert tends to be of use until the thing actually happens and everybody throws out this kind of thing. Part of the reason we decided to make sure that we document those items as well, part of it is that one of our co-founders was a poster designer that designed hundreds and hundreds of posters for various concerts and festivals and poetry readings. At the time, the BANQ and the National Library just would not even accept sending over stacks of these kinds of documents. They're not considered legitimate archives. For us, by the time we started the organization, we'd already seen a huge amount of festivals, art galleries, concert spaces come and go. Like, those things themselves are quite ephemeral. They often might only last a few years. Sometimes there's a series of poetry readings or concerts in somebody's loft or in some sort of industrial space that eventually gets converted, condos or commercial space. And so we were really keen on gathering what documentation we could about these kinds of places. A lot of these places were only open for a short period of time, but would leave a really large mark in the sense that people remember very clearly the concerts they saw there, the art they saw there, the inspiration and the sense of a gathering of like-minded or similarly weird, or people with different tastes or whatever it is. You know what I mean? The punk scene is a great example of that, of the kinds of very short-lived kind of bands and places. Sometimes a lot of these bands never even got a proper record out. So when we have demos, we have flyers, we have zines that have some references to them. All these years later, researchers are actually able to access quite a bit of material. When we started working about 10 years ago on the archives of some hip-hop concert promoters, it was the same sort of thing. We were asked to help digitize stacks and stacks of flyers and posters for concerts. And we realized, oh my God, there's like 1,000 different places here. Some places I've never heard of, church basements, community spaces, all kinds of different places. And in talking to these people, we realized that there was a similar dynamic to, say, the underground art scene or the punk scene, in the sense that the mainstream large venues are not really accessible to them, just as they weren't for small, DIY punk concert producers or whatever. In some cases, for similar reasons, the sense that that kind of music is maybe dangerous or violent. In hip-hop, there's a long-standing difficulty in some of the promoters convincing clubs and concert spaces to host these events because of the stereotype of gangsters and so on going along with that music. And so they would always have to hustle and try to find a new place to play, a new place to play. And so we felt very much, in a similar situation, and very happy to be able to help document some of these places the same way. We also have always collected and gathered ever increasing amount of small community newspapers, very often short-lived small magazines or even brochures or bulletins that would get printed and circulate. And when you take those, you take the music collection, you take the flyers, the posters, the zines. Years later, you actually have a certain amount of documentation of these places. Unfortunately, you can't really find in the larger, more institutional archives. When we started just before the pandemic, collaborating a lot with the CIDICA, which is the Haitian Community Archive and Arts Association in Montreal, the Centre d'interprétation et de documentation internationale haïtien et afro-caribéen, we became fast friends, and we realized that we had a very, very similar context. They've been active since the 1980s, and like ourselves, saw a huge value in trying to get ephemeral materials from the public. Anything from old photos and home movies that the community members would take, to flyers for book launches, community newspapers, and chapbooks, self-published publications. Really the very, very similar range of kinds of materials that we do, and for the same reasons. What was also great was realizing over the years we've gained the trust of some of the more outsider artists, the wilder concert promoters, bands, people who are leery of institutions for whatever reason. And that's a key part of a community archive, is getting the trust of the community that you're archiving. That allows you to, with the trust of these people, receiving their materials, their trust that their community members will be able to access it over time. It also allows you to ask them to interview them about the past, and to flesh out a lot of the context of these stories. So being anchored in the community and getting the trust of the community is as important, we realized, for just about any small and specialized archive, especially a cultural archive. We've since collaborated with organizations in the Caribbean community, the wider Black community in Montreal, and once again, most recently with this project, discovering how similar some of the organizations in Chinatown or the Chinese community are doing things. A very similar formula, getting the trust of the community and seeing the value in some of these otherwise forgotten kind of archival materials, business cards, postcards, and the like. I'll switch over to show you some of these things as we lead into how this relates to nightlife and cultural locations. Well, once again, it is really not easy sometimes to get pictures of these places. The era before smartphones, which is most of history until the last 15 years, you would have a lot of trouble sneaking a camera into a concert, for example, or a play, and setting off the flash a bunch of times. So things like postcards, we have some here for some of the people might recognize, Dunn's, Ruby Foo's. There's also the Casa Loma Cafe here, which was the location for quite decades of concerts and things in Montreal. We also have, for some of these, there's even things like swizzle sticks that bars would make to people could take home. And it's both advertising and fun to have. We have actually one in here for Casa Loma. There's the Stork Club, which you could probably figure out which one that is. The Kontiki. These kinds of things, along with also matchbooks. There's one from the Kontiki. Often people will mention a place over and over when you interview them, or you research a history, and nobody actually even remembers where they were, or what the sign looked like or something, if you can't find photos of the stuff. So other than being fun little artifacts that you can actually touch and handle and remember some of these places, you do get a bit of the era, the graphic design, all of these various aspects. All of this helps fill in a larger picture, especially when you're able to go a little further. In this case, we're able to get very, very rare pictures directly from one of the performers, Skipper Dean. He was a longtime singer in many bands, playing from the 60s through till the current day, but all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s. he performed in a lot of different venues, and some of the pictures that we were able to get from him that he held on to are of the inside of nightclubs that we cannot find a single other picture anywhere. It's not as easy as Google imaging this stuff. Chances are people find some of this, and when they do a search in Google image, it's probably something that we put online, thanks to that, all of the hard work of tracing down the people that might have this stuff, getting their trust, and getting some of the material out. Speaking of locations, among the things we might find in this case is a program from 1964 for a very forgotten nightclub. This was a show at the Forum to raise funds for the 217 Club, which was actually on Laurier near Park Avenue, which nobody can imagine that this was a place where people like Stevie Wonder and the Isley Brothers, Benny King would have played shows at. But it was a small club that was designed for afternoon shows for people of all ages. And once again, we had never heard of this place for all of the references that we had. Now we know about it, and we try to find out more about it. Of course, reference material is also super important. We're lucky to have built up over 20 years in this location a reference library of books about Montreal as well. This is one of the classics of the golden age of jazz in Montreal. And so this helps us sort out, find out more information about things we find, helps us gather leads to find people to talk to. And with regards to cartography and setting up a map of nightlife, of course, these kinds of books are extremely great resources. And so that's another part of the formula. The collections also inform the research in the sense that the huge music collection that we have is another thing that is of importance. We actually play, we have a weekly show on the radio where we can play some of the treasures and things that we find. And we can also, thanks to years of research, actually go and find out if some of these people are still alive and interview them. In this case, for this band, we were able to talk to some of the members. Other kinds of ephemera that's very useful, the infamous Festajazz, one of the earlier versions of the Jazz Fest that were started in Montreal. In this case was held at the Rising Sun, one of the important places for this culture over the years. Not the easiest thing to find, but we were very happy to finally find one of these and be able to add it to the archives of that place. Might pull up a few other things afterwards, but to get back into the presentation, all of this in the last few years has informed a project that led us to create a new website called Nights of Montreal. Essentially, during the pandemic, we were lucky to get funding to do oral histories, interviews with lots and lots of people, particularly in the diverse Black music scenes of Montreal. We were able to, when we realized how much material we had about locations, the idea of a map of important places came up. We teamed up with an institution called the Afro Museum, the Afro Musée in Montreal, which had begun putting a little map on their website of places that they knew about. But we figured, hey, let's team up and do something proper about this. We were able to get funding from the former programs for funding heritage projects in Montreal in 2023 to propose a nightlife sort of website, a nightlife map on a website that people can look at and also comment on different locations and add their memories and this kind of thing. We launched the project through a series of events where we interviewed some of the musicians and people involved in nightlife in the past eras, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s hip-hop scene, where we were able to present archival material from our research, as well as people on stage talking about their experiences and answering questions from the public. That was really great to be able to do that, because these kinds of projects, you want to go back and forth in the public. You don't want to just go out there, get some archives, come back, and then write a thesis or something. The idea is that all of this helps to keep the archives alive and also growing and getting more people finding out about them and reaching more people who might be able to suggest collectors who kept stuff, photographers, or people's deceased relatives who hoarded a lot of material. We always love finding out about that, following leads. The project was great and went through all the way through 2024. And just to keep the ball rolling on all of this, we decided to develop a whole series of workshops, community participatory workshops, zine workshops, based on the archival material of the map. And it was another way to continue to keep the project going, and also to build more roots in the community. The project saw us host workshops in different parts of town that are represented on the map. So there were presentations and zine workshops and discussions about the jazz age in Little Burgundy at the Tyndale Center in particular. We did an event at the UNIA, also in Little Burgundy, when we talked about the origins of hip-hop in Côte-des-Neiges and block parties and the parks of the area. We were able to do it at the Black Community Resource Center at BCRC in Côte-des-Neiges, and actually see from the windows some of the locations that for that workshop, Butcher T, the first hip-hop DJ in Montreal, was able to point at places and talk about some of these important places that are on the map and that are part of the cultural memory of the community. That leads us to talking a bit more about the specific projects that we developed outside of that. I think on that note, I will throw it to Chloe, who done a great job of helping to organize and carry out some of these things. So.
Yeah, well, thank you, Louis. I just wanted to mention again that tonight's presentation is also part of this separate series that we're organizing called Owning Our Histories, which I'm the organizer, and it's going to be 10, well, it's 10 events that's going up until the end of March. And so we have 5 more events, and if you want to learn more about them, you can check out our website, but they are all centered around queer and BIPOC communities in Montreal, archiving themselves through zines, independent publications, grassroots collections, and stuff like that. So yeah, there's lots of exciting work going on around community archiving. But just to talk a little bit more about this map that we've been developing for the last couple of years, I'm going to now share my screen. Okay, yes. We are very excited to be presenting to you guys our sort of revamped Knights of Montreal map, which recently kind of got a facelift. So as Louis mentioned, the last couple of years, or yeah, really for a decade almost, ARCMTL has been doing a lot of work around Black Montreal music and nightlife culture, specifically through interviews with important musicians and club owners, concert venue owners, promoters, people like that. And part of that was this sort of presentation series at the Afro Musée. And yeah, as he mentioned, a lot of the important things that came up in these conversations were the venues. And so we really wanted to sort of map these out, so it started with creating a list of all of these important clubs and venues that would come up in the interviews we would do, and then plot them with the goal of archiving these spaces, many of which were only around for a handful of years. And so we didn't want them to become forgotten. So here's the map. A lot of focus is on clubs from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, places that don't exist anymore and that were really important to the nightlife scene of their day. So you can actually filter the map by decade. So if you want to see clubs from the 30s to the late 50s, or from the 60s to the 70s. And this is very much still a work in progress. So there are many venues that aren't on the map yet. We have a whole spreadsheet with like tons of stuff, and most of the ones we haven't added yet, it's just because we're missing information on them. And so like Louis said, like it's really hard to find pictures of these places. It's really hard to kind of find documentation on them at all. And that's sort of one of the challenges we've been facing, is that you have to do a lot of digging and speaking to people and collecting these things like person to person. A lot of the archives of different newspapers like the Gazette, the Montreal Star, Petit Journal, Photojournal, and the student newspapers like the Georgian or the McGill Daily have been really valuable resources in terms of tracking the dates of some of these venues. So this was back in the time when people would post adverts in the paper as really the way to get the word out that this show is happening. So it's great for us because then we get to track like, oh, they started having ads in 1967 and stopped having ads in these major newspapers in like 1970. So you can kind of track the lifespan of some of these clubs. So, just to give you guys a little tour, so each one of these pins on the map is a different venue. And so you get the name of the club, sort of how long it was around for, the address, and then a little description. And if you want to read more, you can click on that and it will link to a blog post that has more pictures and more information. We've also started adding audio clips. So through some of these interviews we've been doing over the years, getting to add little snippets of people talking about these places. So the Black Bottom is a club that we've been doing a lot of research into the last couple of years, and also have maintained a close relationship with Charles Burke, who is the owner, and provided us with a lot of his personal archives that have been just amazing to have, and that we've been trying to share with people. So here's a little clip actually from a musician named Harry Marks, who played at the original location of the Black Bottom. So yeah, you can hear him talk a little bit about what an important space it was.
We've already talked about the Black Bottom, but is there something you would think about first thing when somebody mentions that club? Was it really important?
It was important. It was important to me, but it was important to young jazz musicians across the city. It was important because we had a chance. What are the chances? What are the possibilities that a guy that is into jazz as a student? I mean, I play now about 100 times better than I did then. What is the chances that as a student, you know, my playing would have been really amateur compared to these guys, and yet I had a chance to stand right next to Cannonball Adderley, or the bass player from Miles Davis, or some of these great musicians, you know, that or if I didn't play with him, I was able to see him up close and personal, you know.
Yeah, so that's a little excerpt that just speaks to like how amazing these places were. And I'd like to tell you guys a little bit more about the Black Bottom, just because it's not a super well-known story, but it's like a really incredible story. I might have to stop and reshare my screen though. Okay, so here is our, so if you clicked on like read more about this club, it would bring you to this page. And so the Black Bottom, the original location was 1350 St. Antoine Street. It started off really as an after-hours basement coffee house just down the street from Rockhead's Paradise and the Café Saint Michel, which were two other really important Black-owned nightclubs of that era. And this was back when that corner of Mountain and St. Antoine was really an epicenter of nightlife. So we also have the menu of the Black Bottom, and so we even have a paper copy too.
Yeah, we were able to keep a couple spares that the owner had.
Yeah, and so it's amazing. You have rich broiled and sauce, distinctively gustable, esculent, comestible ribs. It's just amazing. And so the Black Bottom, it was this little basement, and it was famous for two things: soul food, specifically Charles Burke, who was the owner, his famous chicken wings, which were his mother's recipe, and also Nelson Simons, who was the house guitarist. And Nelson Simons, he was known for playing chords as fast as notes. So he was like this incredible guitar player, and he would attract all of the best jazz players in town to this little after-hours spot. So they would open at 10 p.m., which is after some of the other clubs like Rockheads or Saint Michel. The musicians, they would finish their gig over there and then walk down the street to the Black Bottom, have some chicken wings and some coffee, and just jam until like 10 a.m. the next day. So these are all stories that we've gotten from Charles, and we even have a link here to read a full transcript with our interview with Charles Burke from 2023. It just has some amazing stories. So yeah, Nelson Simons was even invited to join all of these bands from visiting American musicians, but legend has it that he was a very shy person and never wanted to leave Montreal. So he never left. He just stayed here his whole life and was very just sort of a local star. But oh yeah, here's a picture of Miles Davis at the Black Bottom with kind of, it looks like a photo of Charles Burke where his head was cut off from another photo and glued on. But another story we had was that Miles Davis would just sit in the back of the room eating chicken wings and firing the bones all over the floor. And Charles Burke was like, well, that's just what he does. That's that guy. So, and then you have a little description of the club here. It doesn't go into super a lot of detail. We did also put out a Wikipedia article on the Black Bottom. So another one of the things we've been trying to do is put out Wikipedia articles of some of these venues, just to make them easier for people to learn about, to make them like, yeah, just easy to research and find. The sad story about this club is that it was expropriated in 1967 with the construction of the Ville Marie Expressway, which famously was partly responsible for the demolition of the whole northern part of the Saint Antoine area that we now call Little Burgundy. And that was sort of Jean Drapeau era. A lot of working class neighborhoods were demolished, and in the name of urban renewal. So after that, Charles Burke had to relocate to Old Montreal, and then the club kept going for another 10 years or so, but it changed. And I think he's mentioned to us a few times that he has a lot of regret about leaving the neighborhood and how something integral was kind of lost in that move. Another part of the website is the comment section, which is actually a really nice space for people to kind of connect and share memories about some of these places. So we even had Charles Burke comment something about Nelson Simons. Many musicians came to sit in and play alongside of him, of course. After one set, many who came never returned. Instead, they went to their respective music teachers and practiced so they could keep up. So yeah, that guy was a real legend. So yeah, I guess I will show you.
Show the full blog.
Yeah, I can show you the full blog. So here was part of one of our events at the Afro Museum. So yeah, we kind of were in conversation with Charles, and he talked about his childhood growing up in the Saint Antoine area, and his dream of, well, he also worked as a railway porter like many men in that time. It was one of the few jobs available to Black men at that period. And then he quit his job to fulfill his dream of opening a nightclub. So it's a really amazing story. If anyone's interested, you can read more about it on our blog.
It's worth noting that we have translated all of these blog posts into English and French. They tend to be edited. We have many longer versions, either available to researchers or that we're using for other projects, different interviews. But in a case like this, we put a nice, tightly edited version of the interview or the discussion, in this case, public presentation. And we are able to make it available in both languages. And I think a lot of people on the Francophone side also remember these places. I mean, they were huge fans. I mean, most of the nightclubs and the music scene, especially in jazz, was very Anglophone, all the jazz musicians and such coming up. So it's extra great to be able to not just document important English language institutions and persons, but let these stories be discoverable by as many people as possible.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back to the map now to show you guys a couple of other plots on it. One that might be more surprising to some of you is, let me see, James Ling High School, which, let me find it over here.
All the way there.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people don't know that James Ling was actually a really important venue for hip hop concerts back in the 90s, when a lot of other venues wouldn't book hip hop artists.
Even 80s.
Even the 80s, yeah. So they would perform just in like the high school auditorium. And we have some posters from Howard Stretch Carr here. Let's see, we also have the NCC, and you can listen to Skipper Dean speaking a little bit about the NCC.
And, it was like a family, because everybody took care of each other while they were there. And we'd have Friday night dances there, and, so it was a place to go during the day and after school. They had a piano, and there were there was ballet there, Olga Spencer taught tap. There were a lot of tap dancers back then. But it was just anything, you suggested. If all the kids wanted to do it, they'd find a way to make it happen for you there.
Yeah. So basically the 20th century, it was just such a, like the second half of the 20th century was just such a rich period of time for nightlife, and there's so many clubs that would pop up and then disappear a few years later. So the map was really just an effort to document these places, to have an archive of them, and to also share these stories of people in the community. A lot of this generation are dying out, right? So there is an urgency to record these stories and to share them and preserve them. And also the map is a great way to visualize sort of the important neighborhoods and how nightlife would move throughout the decades to different areas. So the eventual plan is to add also more categories and filters so that people can sort by not only decade, but by genre or by other things. Let me see. So I guess what brings me to my next point is that we have this amazing resource, but then the next question was what to do with it. So I'm going to share my screen again to a different page. Okay, here we go. So, so basically the idea came up to apply for funding from Heritage Canada and put together a series of zine making workshops led by different English-speaking Afro-descendant artists, researchers, and musicians to really document this history collaboratively. So the series was called Our Places, Our Stories, and it was 8 zine making workshops from November 2024 to December 2025. And the idea was to have all of these zines available at Expo Zine and to share them there. So Delilah is going to speak later a bit more about the zine medium and why we chose like zines, what is a zine, why we chose it as a way to sort of be part of this history. But the idea on our end was to have as many different partners and collaborators as possible from the Black Anglophone community. So as Louis mentioned, we hosted them at different community spaces like Tyndale, the Black Community Resource Center, the UNIA Hall, as well as some more zine-related spaces like Drawn and Quarterly, for example. And each workshop was led by different people and covered different themes in the history of Black music and nightlife. Here are some of the different zines. So you can see that each one kind of covers a different decade or era. So our first one was sort of that golden era of jazz from like the 20s to up until the 50s. Workshop 2 was the 60s and 70s, and we moved into 80s, early hip hop. And then we had one on the Caribbean community of the 70s and 80s. And here were the last 3, workshop 5 was like 80s and 90s funk and disco. Then we covered more 90s, 2000s, rap and hip hop, concert party scene. Volume 6 and 7, we ended up combining into one zine because I think workshop number 6 just had very low turnout. So we didn't have a lot of page material. But every workshop kind of followed a similar structure in that we would split it into half, and the first half would have some sort of presentation or interview with an important musician or nightlife figure or researcher, and would cover some of the key aspects like the important venues, political, cultural changes in Montreal from that era, and really sort of sharing stories of that period. So for example, we had Butcher T come and talk about the early 80s hip hop scene and, being the first person to set up the double spin table. And so it was just really cool to have him there and have people be able to ask questions and hear person to person some of these stories. And then the second half, we would invite an artist facilitator who would guide the participants through the creation of a page that would go towards a collaborative zine. For anyone who's not familiar with zines, it's basically just a little book that like anyone can make and print off, and you've now published yourself a little book. So that's sort of the beauty of a zine. So yeah, so a lot of it would be artwork or collage or poetry. So people would be inspired by the stories they heard and then create something that kind of is it their own connection to the history and their own like sort of artistic interpretation of the stories. So yeah, we would, and all these different artists that we would invite would also do the cover too. So that's why all of these zines have these amazing different covers and different styles. So, and then we would provide sort of material from the archives to help people get inspired. So that would be like newspaper clippings or photographs. This is a poster of one of the very first jazz festivals organized by Doudou Boissel of the Rising Sun. And so, yeah, we scan them, people could cut them up and make collages. There's some really beautiful results. Oh yeah, here are some pictures from No Can Do, who was a really important hip hop artist and was there for workshop number 6 to do an interview. Oh yeah, here's a little snippet of No Can Do talking about the Rising Sun. Oh yeah, here's our workshop number 3 with Butcher T. This other photo is workshop number 7. We had Hasina Kamanzi, who was our artist facilitator, giving a little brief history of the zine. And then here's a snippet of No Can Do talking a bit about the Rising Sun.
Here we have one of my mentors, Mr. Doudou Boissel, who's the founder of the Jazz Festival and had a club called the Rising Sun. And that's where I met my personal mentors in the business the first time. Mishimi and LA Love, who are total rap pioneers in this city. The first to have a deal across the border in the US. I met them at Mr. Doudou Boissel's Rising Sun because I was like one of his kids. And a lot of my musical education actually for my sample-based style of production happened in the Rising Sun's music library. You know, I had access to all the vinyl, and I got to see a whole lot of jazz shows and other shows at the Rising Sun. You know, a lot of black music was infused in me at the Rising Sun. It's a place that people forget because he's the founder of the Montreal Jazz Festival. A lot of people forget that a lot of great hip hop shows happened at the Rising Sun as well.
Yeah, so we would also record these interviews and these presentations and then do like an edited transcript of them to include in the zine. So if people weren't able to attend the workshop, they could still read about these stories and hear these anecdotes in the zine with the accompanying artwork. So here are some pages from some of the zines. So this is from volume 4, where we included excerpts from an interview with Pat Dillon Moore, who's a filmmaker and very important CKUT broadcaster, and is also doing a talk as part of this lecture series on Caribbean steel pan artists on the 27th, I think. And then here's another spread from volume number 5, where we had, so yeah, again, I don't know if you, Louis, wanted to say something about all the interviews you guys did, like during the pandemic, especially, which like created a lot of material for these workshops.
Well, once again, we were lucky to be able to get funding to do oral histories, and then the pandemic made it such that people had lots of time to just stay on the phone or stay on a Zoom and chat. So it definitely helped create a lot of the foundation of the oral histories and stories that we got. And one thing that came out of that was we realized that after every interview, we had a whole list of other places to write down. And then the next person we'd interview would be like, do you remember this place, this place, this place? So it definitely is a big part of that.
Yeah, and
the process.
There were a lot of interviews. I think like a few, like maybe 40 or something.
Yeah, we were lucky to interview a few dozen people.
Yeah.
And the way it goes is that several of them are no longer with us, but just goes to show how important it was for us to do that work and to keep these projects going.
Yeah. So And yeah, I guess just to sum up the workshops, I know Delilah will speak a bit more about them, but they just ended up being this really kind of special space for people of different generations to connect, and that was another important thing for us to like foster a space for intergenerational connection, to learn about these histories, reflect on the history and how the city has changed too. So yeah, that's a bit about the Our Places, Our Stories series. And then I'm gonna pass it over to Delilah now to talk a little bit more about it as someone who was very involved in the series as well.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I guess no need really for an introduction. You guys are we have already gotten one, but just as a reminder, so yes, my name's Delilah. I'm a part-time artist sometimes, cultural and art curator, as well as creative workshop facilitator. So yes, as you can see in these pictures, I was responsible for the final session of Our Places, Our Stories, following Hito Joseph, Black Montreal historian he does like walking tours. I feel like he's very, very involved, especially with capturing Black Montreal and Black Montreal's history, particularly, which is really great. Um, so yes, and I was responsible for the creative portion of that session. So I guess in my like in this part of the presentation, we're kind of just going to get into why a zine workshop really, and why was this medium really chosen for this project, if you will? So Chloe already mentioned it, but a zine is essentially a short form magazine. It's very historically known as an ex inexpensive method of publication, so it's very accessible. Anyone can really do it. You can do it with one simple sheet of paper and just folding it, and then you have a zine, as we've mentioned. They were most often used to document local histories, artwork, and messaging, and were famously spearheaded by marginalized communities, especially queer, femme, and BIPOC-led ones, and many of those intersecting at times, which were and are still in our communities that are still excluded from mainstream publishing. So um, I think this project really highlights that in that we're able to get direct histories from Black historians themselves. Um, yeah. And then, sorry, let me just see where I'm in my notes. I went all over the place for a second. Oh yes, so yes, to this day you can still access zines at libraries. Right now, Webster Library has Arc Montreal's exhibit up right now. Um, but m many different libraries in the city, or just in cities in general, will sometimes, if you like, when you enter, there's like a little stand. You can oftentimes find some zines there. Expos and just word of mouth or person-to-person distribution. It's really a medium that's filled with stories told by the people for the people. So this is really a perfect way to capture the history of Black Montreal and its music scene. In terms of the workshop, the community engagement aspect of these workshops, it was particularly important as it not only keeps the essence of accessibility, as the workshops were free and open to really anyone. So no participant needed zine making experience, or it had needed to be an artist for that matter. It was really, we wanted to open the doors to anyone in order to participate in a community dialogue. Um, but it also allows for, yes, collective dialogue and contributing to its archiving. So in doing these workshops, this is now shared community knowledge and can be an active dialogue outside of these spaces, thanks to its participants. So as we mentioned before, we had the workshops had gone on a bit across the city, so you were getting a wide variety of folks, different generations, who are now able to take what they've learned and spread it out further. So that continues there. Um, and then also through the medium of zine, we're able to cover a wide range of topics and highlight details of Black Montreal, or specific details of Black Montreal. Of course, this material wasn't exactly hidden, as we've mentioned before, but it wasn't necessarily accessible. So through a workshop like this, or creative workshop like this, we were able to compile and literally add color as many of the like archival materials that the participants were using were literally black and white. um, and figuratively of color, of course, and context to this otherwise black and white timeline, and then successfully capture the essence of this like thriving and beautiful nightlife history. So I guess now we can really talk about just like a recap of how the like work or anyways my workshop session was really structured. So I found it really important to really get the participants comfortable and reminding them that this is a moment for play. So really nothing else was expected of them. So as I'd mentioned, the session started with a presentation from Rito Joseph. And so they were had that percolating in their mind. And then I kind of had them participate in this creative warm up, if you will. So creativity, like any muscle, needs warming up. And so I, in my workshops, I really like to do a sort of like rapid fire drawing session where the participants will kind of pick out of a bowl like these words that everyone submitted, and you kind of get these like random assortment drawing subjects, if you will. And it's a really great exercise because it everyone gets the same topic, and I give them like time intervals to kind of draw that out. So one of the like ones I think we had during this workshop was like winter bug or something like that. And so yeah, they'll have varying intervals. So we'll do it like for 1 minute, 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. And a common reaction during the workshop is like, oh my God, this looks so horrible, and time has gone by so fast. And at the end, this is the part, and for me anyways, that I find really, really satisfying is that there's always like a show and tell portion where everyone kind of shows what they've depicted. And I think it's a great moment for the participants to see a variety of depictions of the same idea and how each person will inherently sew in specific details that they felt matters to them. And so from there, that's like the foundation that we like build upon then to like then make the zine pages for this workshop specifically. Um, so it kind of follows the same with that warm up, it kind of follows the same I guess like idea. So I would give them prompts, and we also provided them with some archival pictures, mostly black and white. So that included things like old pictures of old music clubs, important nightlife street maps that we kind of got to see. So some of it was like literally like screenshots. Um, as well as event posters, buildings of historic clubs, or anyways, where the clubs were and what they look like now, along with a variety of different contemporary magazines and comics that they were able to choose from to kind of add into their zine pages. And then from there, we kind of got to, while they were working, I would kind of throw in some questions similar to like that creative warm up. Um, so the questions included things like, what is currently missing in this visual history? So we kind of see the skeletons of these institutions that are no longer there, whether it's like replaced by like an Urban Outfitters or something like that. But what did the buildings used to look like? Like, how can we incorporate that in your page? Who inspired these movements? So I don't think we have it in any of these pages, but on some of the covers, for example, we have important figures that were pillars and pioneers in, I guess, Black Montreal music history. Um, and then we also got to have a bit of a discussion in terms of like, what do you hope to see moving forward in Montreal nightlife and music scene? And in some of the workshops that I got to participate in as a participant, we also had conversations surrounding that in terms of, I guess, what's missing now, and is there hope to, I guess, revitalize some of these spaces? Of course, in having workshops like this, the fact that you already know of their existence and that the fact that there's so many people who want that nightlife to come back, I think it's a good starting point, of course. But yes, so that was another point of discussion. What do the insides of these places look like? So, of course, in I think some of the photos that we've seen, we saw Black Bottom, Rockhead's Paradise, Thunderdome, and then what stood out to them in Hito's retelling. So, throughout this workshop, I really wanted to emphasize or remind them that their perspective was important to be captured and is valuable, especially as they are now part of the Montreal historical fabric and its archiving. So as we're making these zine pages together, we're creating a collective visual history of our city's history that has seemingly been ignored. And so without archiving, the spread of this knowledge would essentially be lost. But fortunately, thanks to the great work of ARC Montreal and I guess workshops like this, the we now have like a new way to look through these archives. Of course, there's like, if you want to go back, I think one page, Chloe. I just want to see your page, actually. Um, oh, perfect. So there's already current commentary on what's going on, as well as like thoughts, and I think there's like even like poetry excerpts. So it's a nice amalgamation of like current day commentary on, I guess, like old Black institutions and clubs, which I thought was really, really interesting. And yeah, we have a new way of looking through it. So that was essentially the workshop. Did you want to add anything, Chloe, in terms of like the specific pages?
No, I thought you did a great job. Yeah,
Okay.
it's cool to see, some people would write, yeah, some people would like write poetry or like do like all the different interpretations. I think you did a really fun page once that was like a one-on-one on how to party after we had just heard Ricky D from Ricky D Events talking about the party scene of like the early 2000s, and we were all talking about like what's happened to that party scene. So yeah, it's cool to like just have this space for conversations around nightlife and to reflect on the history of nightlife and what it is now and what we would imagine we'd like it to be. So, yeah, I thought you covered it really well.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I thought it was great, especially because I think I'd heard about this project. I went to the first workshop in, what was that, November 2024 at Drawn Quarterly, and the page that I got to draw was about FL Bruno, who I'd never heard of, but I had done dance like for most of my life before that, like ballet and jazz, and so it was so interesting to learn about someone who was so pivotal in, I guess, like Black Montreal and just Black history, but was completely shut off to me and just not something that was discussed. From there, of course, I wanted more. I've since participated in like, I think two other workshops and then my own. So that was really great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I think this all really illustrates what the job of keeping things going, as far as not just getting a grant, doing the one project, and then it ends up being some website that doesn't get updated for years. We're glad to keep it going. And one thing I should mention is that we just finished we're almost finished an update. There's a few more features that are going to be hitting this site. It did end up getting a bit buggy after 2 years after we had gotten the funding and set it up on a real shoestring budget. So it's going to get better. There are also some mistakes and some errors in there. At one point, one of the nightclub owners gave us some dates and things that were turned out to be a little off. I guess, the decades go by and you can't just rely on people's memories. We try to cross-reference as much as we can and find other sources, but we really, really appreciate anybody who can comment and send more info or put us in touch with anybody else who has archives. Even notice in the comments that it looks like we should probably update our NCC entry. I'm sure that some of the dates and addresses might be a bit off. Actually, a whole bunch of the addresses got moved to different parts of town when we started doing this update these past few weeks on the site. So bear with us and also see it as something that we're all doing together. Once again, anybody can comment. I don't think you need an account or anything. You can comment at the end of any of the pages that talk about venues. You can send a direct email to us through the About page for whatever reason. And we're really looking forward to putting more and more stuff on there. More audio, more locations, maybe expanding a bit too to all kinds of Montreal nightlife. Because this is a tool for us to get all this stuff from these archives behind us here more accessible and better known. I think if there's questions other than from the chat, I could maybe throw it back to our host Glenn and see where we can go from here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, you three. Wonderful presentation. And I think for both Jody and myself here, I just finished a PhD about community archiving and DIY archiving. That's kind of where my roots are too, although I did it in a different part of the province. I think both of us have a lot of questions, a lot of excitement. So we will open the Q&A now. So for Zoom participants, you can all turn on your webcams if you like. Just before I forget, I'm going to let people unmute themselves if they want to. Okay, so yes, if you have a question, the easiest way to let us know is you can use the reaction icon, or I think there's just a raise hand button at the bottom of Zoom now. You can use that, click that, it'll show us you have a question, then we'll queue you up. You're welcome to, just use your mic or camera and your mic together, whatever you're comfortable with. You can also write your question in the chat box, and if I see it, I'll read it on your behalf as well. So yes, if you're on Facebook and YouTube, I'll try to take a peek over there. I'm doing double duty tonight, so might not see it as quickly, but I'll do my best to check in there if there are any questions on social media. Let's see, maybe I think I'll start. I wanted to ask, I wrote like a ton of fragments of questions here, so bear with me. I wanted to talk, it seems you're doing a lot of your ethos is about collaborating with other organizations, also like from underrepresented communities who are doing their own forms of archiving. I'm wondering how ARCMTL kind of sees its mandate and, how it, when something comes to you, for example, from the community, how do you sort of decide, this is for ARCMTL, or, maybe this would be better off with another group? And I'm kind of wondering how you see sort of you working in partnership with these other organizations. And, I guess mandates do tend to overlap, but how does that affect how you archive? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Any of you can take that.
Well, I could say that over the years, we're all kindred spirits, people who also run small community archives, community centers, or very particular specific history projects for their communities. We all have the same challenges. Sometimes it's funding, sometimes it's a place to host events in. As far as the actual collection of archives, we are in touch with and talk regularly with all kinds of other ones. For example, we put aside material sometimes that would be best to bring to another archive. We have a stack of Indigenous Mohawk music recorded in Montreal, for example, that we may bring over to the new Mohawk Cultural Center where the archive will be shortly.
Gay archives.
The gay archives and lesbian archives, there's quite a lot of stuff that we're going to want to start sharing and maybe bringing over to them. But of course, we all help each other on different projects. We're processing some archives for a project the Gay Archives is doing currently. The main thing is that we all share the same sort of challenge. Archives are not glamorous. People, if they're not doing research, working on a documentary film or some school project, they don't even look up is there an archive in town or whatever.
I think there's also the concern that there are some archives that are less accessible to the public, and one of our sort of priorities has been that we want people to be able to access these archives, and so I guess like that's been a thing. I don't know.
They have to go out and live, so we have several exhibits each year, usually concert posters, printed art, things like that. We have this exhibit of zines that actually is a great example. There's about 6 different archives that contributed materials, zines from their own collections, gay archives, lesbian archives, some radical archives that are currently up at the Webster Library at Concordia. On the more technical level, we also all write each other multiple letters of support and partner letters each year when we all apply for grants. Because in the small archive sector and small heritage organization sector, we call it the hustle. If you stop moving, you die. You have to pay the rent. You want to have some staff. You want to get job program employees. You need to have at least one staff sitting there. So and there's no core funding. There's no like one budget that the city or the federal or the provincial government gives to keep people going. They just fund projects. So you have to come up with projects, which is great. That means you need to continually come up with new collaborations, new ideas of reaching the public. Lectures, symposiums, conferences, workshops. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but since we're all in that same sort of like challenge of coming up with activities that can keep our things going.
Yeah, I think there is like a concern of like keeping things within community archives, especially when they belong to marginalized communities. And there's sometimes a fear that like if, Archives Canada gets a hold of this stuff, it's going to suddenly become like lots of institutional barriers in terms of accessing them. And so I feel like there's this real sort of like network of solidarity between the community archives to be like, we're all kind of in contact with each other. We're all friends with each other. We're going to kind of share things with each other. and make sure that they're going back into the community through different initiatives like the workshop series or the website.
Wonderful. I love the way you guys are thinking about this. I see a comment here from Sean asking, he says it's a fabulous project. I wish it could get bigger visibility. Asks about why an institution, well, I'm not going to name it because, we're all in this together, but, one of the bigger institutions is sleeping on this. And I had a similar question. I mean, I think in my work, I found at a certain point, I was trying to do things again, very like limited resources, limited personnel. And at a certain point, I, tried to reach out to a larger regional museum that had a good archives. And importantly for me, an actual archives facility that could properly physically preserve records. Do you guys have any sense of possibilities for collaboration with the BNQ, McCord, just other sort of more canonical institutional archives, and maybe I think Chloe, you mentioned there could be some tensions there with these community groups, but have you entertained that at all?
Oh, quite a bit. The BANQ is the one that we've worked the most with, but that's more on our more artistic side. The printed art, the art prints, the zines, the artist books, because we're very active in that sector, gathering archives. We've helped them quite a bit build up their own beginnings of collections of posters and prints. We helped them start a zine collection in 2005. That's become more popular now that there's a buzz around zines, and they have some public collections in various libraries in Montreal. But that's because there's that niche in the BANQ that we work with. When we tried to speak with the people from the music department a few years ago with the Berliner Museum, we got a grant and digitized hundreds and hundreds of rare records and 78s between the Berliner Museum and our collections. And we hope to collaborate with the BANQ, but I mean, a lot of these big institutions are like, who do you think you are? How do we know your technical standards are going to be up to snuff? And what is this stuff you're talking about? We looked it up. None of it seems to have existed. They literally have a policy that if a record album was not distributed in the mainstream stores to all Quebecers, it's not worthy of being added to their archives. So on a structural level, there's just, we do what we do, and we do it at a very, very down to earth, down on the street with the community level. And they just aren't set up for that. They have a whole other, they're kind of the temple on the hill where the stuff gets conserved forever, which is great. I'm glad they have cold storage and the facilities to keep some samples of these for a long time. But there's a pretty big gap between the approaches that we do. We talk a lot about this with the Haitian archive in particular, that we're never looking to replace what they do. We just like to be maybe a bit more recognized for what we do. One thing that's in common with them is they don't like, they can't take publications that have a pseudonym or an artist name or not the person's real name attached to it. At the Haitian archive, a lot of that were exiles that were chased out of the country by the dictatorship, and people were using pen names for a very important reason. In our case, a lot of these zine makers, queer zine artists, and so on will have a fictitious name for their work. None of it can get into the National Library of the BANQ. So thank God these smaller institutions are doing that, because otherwise the stuff would just get thrown out and disappear. For some of the other ones, I mean, what happens eventually is sometimes they find out about something we're doing and they're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And they come to us, but we're always worried about them just trying to appropriate it or, get some of the shine and the coolness of what we're doing into their institution. And that's usually after we end up, in the press or in the media for some of our projects. So we're not at all adversarial. We'd like to collaborate more, but, they have their things that they do and we do our things. But there's room for more. I'd love for there to be a lot more. The QAHN is a great kind of organization that can maybe help bridge these gaps and have more dialogues between types of institutions.
For sure. I'm loving so many great comments and questions here in the chat. I'm just having trouble keeping up with them all. So sorry if you've been waiting. Faye, I've seen you over there with your hand up for a while. Do you want to either turn on your mic or your camera or both and ask your question?
Okay, I'll turn on my mic. And I want to kind of make a comment / memory. I'm 62. I live in Toronto, but I grew up in Montreal. Worked in my parent of Caribbean descent. My parents are from Guyana. I can honestly say my mother probably never stepped into a nightclub in the 60s or 70s or 80s. My father, maybe he did, but I'll never know. However, I did over time work in various restaurants and what have you, and I ended up working in a club called Nubia, which was on St. Catherine Street near Fort, which was a reggae club. And listening to this webinar made me realize the importance of even a place like that. It was owned by a Quebecois guy who was the DJ, had never stepped foot in Jamaica, but he somehow had all the reggae music to play. And all the Black people showed up. And it was their place. I mean, in fact, I used to serve pimps. I didn't even know who pimps were until I realized that someone said, hey, they're pimps. And I'm like, okay, they're pimps. They'd order their cognacs and what have you. So, you know, I didn't realize at the time that Nubia was serving a purpose, which was a safe place to be. And so I'm really like listening to this webinar has been really cool to see that you're trying to capture this information. I would probably say that you're not going to get a lot of information from the people who are patrons. You might get more of your information from the owners, because to my knowledge, when I was a bartender at Nubia from 80, maybe 82 to 83, I don't recall a single person with a camera, not like I would today. And I'm the person who put in the comment about what my daughter says now about clubs, that no one wants to cut loose because everyone's afraid of being put on social media. So, I mean, if you're able to reach out to some of the owners who may have had a camera and, you know, had the kind of like the authority to kind of take pictures, that may be where you might get some more information. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great comment. The photography is a big challenge. I'm just going to mention, in case there's anybody on the Zoom, that I've spent a long time trying to get at the original photos at the National Library that they have going back to the 20s for the Montreal Star, the Gazette, stuff from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Most of it is copyright expired or in the hands of the photographer. But it's really, really hard to get them to understand that all the unpublished photos that are sitting in stacks of negatives that are in the archives of these newspapers is also full of treasure that you know, that we would love to get.
I will say that what you are doing by getting voice recordings is probably your next best bet, and that's a really good path to follow.
Definitely.
Okay, we have another question in the. Thank you so much, Faye, for coming on the mic there. We have a comment question from Atu in the Zoom chat here. He said, thanks so much for this webinar. I learned so much. I was wondering if there's been any interest in using these archives for current advocacy work. I'm thinking about the historical context they might provide for recent changes to the city's nightlife policy, noise bylaws, etc.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're all over it. A few years ago, an organization called Montreal 2424 was set up to lobby for nightlife, but we pretty quickly realized that their version of it was like contemporary rave all-night dance clubs, and they didn't have much awareness of the history of the concert venues or the problems involved in that. I've gotten active and gotten to know those folks, have them come over here. They actually came out to one of our events when we talked about St. Antoine and Mountain being a center for nightlife in the 60s. And after the presentation, they're like, really, that corner of all places? We had no idea. So there's a lot to educate, even amongst those who are pushing and are activists currently. We helped coordinate an actual roundtable discussion about this at Pop Montreal. I co-hosted the discussion, and there's a transcript on the ARCMTL website blog, because we are in a time of very, very big challenges for nightlife. And the history is extremely important, and all the people advocating for this really need to find out more about the long history of nightlife in Montreal. Because if they think that it's getting noisy at 8 or 9 p.m., like we had one nightclub closed because of noisy sound check at 7:30 p.m. A cop shut down the show last summer. If they had any idea of what it was like in the 60s, the Black Bottom is a great example. They would open at 10 p.m. A lot of people would show up more around 1. And the tickets to get in were more expensive at 2 a.m. Why? Because the bands would then jam till 8 or 9 in the morning. You know, and I remember even in the early 90s, the corner of Prince Arthur and Saint Laurent, he probably had 40,000 people making a huge rucket till about 5 in the morning there. All the restaurants would have extra staff that would come in at 2:30 to be ready for the influx of people at 3 or 3:30. We've gotten so much more quieter with everything closing and stopping much, much earlier. The fact that there's still any complaints at all I like to say it's these people don't realize that we live in a city. So, definitely this history needs to be better used, and by all of those people lobbying for this kind of for recognition of the reputation of the city. So reputation that goes back 200 years, literally to the early 1800s, especially along Saint Laurent and the intersection with Old Montreal. This has been, Sin City has been a place where people come up to party, and I think we need to do this history will be an important munition in the battle to keep the nightlife alive and thriving.
Wonderful. Very eloquent. Thanks, Louis. Jody, you have a question. Why don't you come on the mic and or camera?
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And I guess first, as Glenn already mentioned, like my background is in archives. I've been worked as an archivist for pretty much 20 years now. And I just wanted to say, commend you on all facets of the work that you're doing. All of it is just amazing. I love, I've always worked in like very sort of more traditional small archives, small like regional archives. But because of the nature of them, like very traditional in content and that kind of thing. But I love when people are able to do like community archiving and activism that way, and also just filling in the archival silences that we see in so many of the institutions, the archival institutions that have been around for a long time, whether it be large ones like LAC, the national or provincial, or even like more regional ones. We see this gap in the stories that are told, and just highlighting ephemera. It's, as archivists, we're constantly making choices of what to keep and what not to keep, and the value in the matchbooks and these like menus and all of that. It's just, anyway, so like, first of all, just a huge congratulations to everything that you've been doing, and also collaborating with the public through your zine workshops. Fantastic. My question, just like, sorry, a comment. I won't be too long, but I just, in terms of like the nightlife, and even in Montreal, I grew up I'm from the townships, Sherbrooke. We didn't have the same nightlife at all, but I've even found in like my research of just community organizations from the past. Recently I was doing some research, and they were talking about this like giant community Christmas party that they had. It was on a Tuesday night, and the buses were picking up people to like bring them back home. I think at 1 a.m. And I'm thinking, you would never get people out to go to a community like party on a Tuesday until 1 a.m. So I think like our concept of nightlife in many communities has changed so much. And it's kind of a loss for me. Not to say that I'd be the person out until 1 a.m., but I wish I was. So anyway, but my question was more about your fantastic map that you created, or that you're using, and putting the information in. What's like, can you share, is it a platform, a software or a platform that you're able to plug in the information, or was it something like that you had built for your project specifically? I know it's like a very specific question, but just, yeah.
Well, we're lucky to have a longtime helper for our websites, a local sound artist and musician, Max Stein, who also has an amazing coder. And a number of years ago, he actually set up what is not online anymore, but a Montreal sound map. Being a sound artist, he had set up a website with a map with like literally the sounds of an air conditioner on such a street, or a car or a truck going by, or a construction site here, or people talking at a very, very interesting sort of project. And the idea came up. We had developed this using plugins and a very sort of small budget. I think it was $3,000 or $4,000 to set up the original map website. So everything had to be free plugins and so on. It was a bit buggy. It wasn't amazing, but it was a start. And I guess at a technical level, we've just been able to update it using some of the tricks that he had used on his sound map. That's partly why we're going to add more audio for all the different locations that are on there. We originally would have liked to have it set up as more interactive, where people can log in and propose their own place.
Clearing the
I think it was, Elan, early on Elan had, I think it was called Mapping the Mosaic, had a similar website where it was just filled with hundreds of locations on the map with people's memories. But I think we're finding a right balance with the ability of people to comment and contact us and have the comments be public. We hope to see long threads like we see on Facebook, but of course Facebook is Zuckerberg's playground, and the stuff, long discussions and threads that you see on there, disappear into the ether and become very impossible, very difficult to track over time. So I definitely hope that will be the future, is more and more people interacting with it. And as far as being able to share how we did it on such a shoestring budget, I'd have no problem giving some tips or some pointers for anybody else that might want to do something like this for their community or for a different project.
Thank you, Jody and Louis and Chloe there. Question again in the Zoom chat. This one's from James. He's just asking if you've had any connections with the Montreal Arts Center and Museum, and also Union United Church. Of course, it's a very, very important institution in the Black community.
Is the Montreal Arts Center the one in Griffintown?
Yeah, we went there a couple of years ago. The guy who started it, Alan Diamond, who's actually sang in a band with Skipper Dean in the early 70s. We have stories from Skipper Dean on the Nightlife map, and a lot of his archives use that.
We did visit.
Yeah, we visited it, and
crazy
we're considering doing an event there at some point. It's definitely a quirky place, and also maybe similar in the sense that there's a interest in having exhibits and information about history, as well as promoting current artists at that place. Union United, obviously it's still, almost all the interview subjects that we've talked to still go there, or go there to connect with old friends and things like that. I'm not sure about doing an actual event there, but perhaps at some point it could be considered.
Mm-hmm. We have been close with the UNIA and their events that they've had going on.
Yeah, there's actually an event on Sunday at the UNIA on hip hop history that I'm looking forward to attend. But yeah, adding all the small organizations with similar missions and mandates, the more that we can get in touch with, the better. And we all encourage each other when we do meet up and collaborate. So none of us is doing this for the paycheck, that's for sure.
Yeah, certainly not. There's some nice comments. I'm gonna read one from Xavier there. Xavier writes, I'd be glad to find ways to collaborate and be more aware of this rich heritage and the impact of these communities. I would love to talk more about it. I don't have a question, but I wanted to thank you for this important work. Your work keeps this legacy alive. To understand the present, you must know the past. So thank you for that, Xavier. Faye also, I think, this is a nice comment. Well, she says, joking, but what you archivists should be doing is activating the bat signal to old club-going West Indians to go through their basements, because they haven't tossed out their matchbook and the like. Thank you, Faye. That's and I'm sure other precious treasures. In my own work, I did a lot of digitizing people's old home recordings. I worked with Anglophone music traditions in the Gaspé region. Again, like lots of folklorists pass through the Gaspé, very prominent ones, but they typically weren't stopping to record the local Anglophone singer or fiddle player. It just wasn't what folklorists and anthropologists were interested in during the 30s, 40s, 50s. So, but people made home recordings, and domestic tape recorders proliferated everywhere, and they documented their music better than any academic or state folklorist could have ever done. So yeah, I think there's so much still out there. I love the way you guys reached out directly to community members. I'm wondering, I guess I have sort of a final question. So much of this kind of work, I feel like, is about relationship building, one-on-one people you meet along the way. How has going, I think you guys said you've been around about 20 years or so, but going back, how has archiving changed for you now that you've built some of these relationships? What are you able to do now that maybe was more of a struggle in the early years?
Well, the one struggle is not so much a struggle, but part of the mission that was spoken to a bit earlier is identifying the gap. The technical term is gap analysis, but what is not being collected? What is being left out? Not just from other, the mainstream institutions, the National Library, City of Montreal archives, but as we get to know more and more of these small and specialized archives, we can all ask each other and talk to each other about, is there something that none of us are actually archiving or documenting that is, again, slipping through the cracks? Often it's the more recent stuff. Archivists tend to have a long view. We focused a lot on the 60s and 70s because these people are still around. They still have stuff. They haven't thrown it out yet, and they can still tell stories. But sometimes it's the stuff from 5-10 years ago, or the crazy art scene that came and went 6 years ago that we found out. Somehow we didn't catch wind of it in time to gather some posters or flyers or documentation. So I think that's part of the challenge and the opportunity of working with more and more small archives and community organizations. So we all help each other stay on top of things and not just fall into a routine or something that's a little that starts getting a bit stale. Because these communities, I mean, entirely new generations of people appear to have popped up out of nowhere after the pandemic, it seems. But people who are producing, making music, making books and zines, starting presses, you can't sit on your laurels, and you cannot adopt the old school archival or museum aspect, whereas if it isn't 50 years old, it's not even an archive yet. I think that's a big thing that has to go out the window if we really want to do a good job of documenting our communities. Like you say, people who've recorded tapes, we have somebody who's in here every week just to digitize, or at first play through and fast forward through tapes that we found or that we received, home recordings, interviews, video stuff too, where we're lucky over the years we've built up all the equipment that or most of the equipment that we need to be able to get through that. But that's a key part of it. Whatever people did, their home movies, their home recordings, the demos, the bands that never released an album, but they recorded at least a few shows. It's really important to keep trying to get that and to respect it. Like I said, a lot of the major institutions, they'll look up someone who's bringing them an archive of them or their parents' work or whatever, and they'd be like, we never heard of them. They're not an important Canadian figure. We can't waste taxpayer money in processing this at the National Library, blah, blah, blah. But when groups like ours just go ahead and do it, once again, we found things and discovered very important stuff that some years later these same big institutions are going to come knocking and try to get a piece of that excitement that we often find when we can get these stories.
I think that you mentioned, I guess, archiving the present day scenes as well. I agree, it's so important. I'll never run out of questions, but I'll then some point tonight. But I wanted to know, like, do you do field work, like in the present moment? Do you go to events and shows with the express purpose to record for the purposes of archiving for posterity, rather than receiving things, after the fact?
Oh yeah, we have a weekly radio show on CKUT, and if me or whoever else is doing the show, we see expired posters, for events that just happened last week, take them down, bring them in. One of our staffers works at a record store and does the same thing, takes all the posters off the wall, gathers up copies of all the flyers every week. It's also garage sales and things like that. Just about the only thing I do socially is go to art vernissage, book launches, record launches, concerts. And there's always an opportunity to grab things and put them aside.
And then Expozine too. Like, a lot of our collection is works that come out of Expozine. So we've set up this Expozine award system to try and get people to give us their stuff, and then we house them at the archive. So that's always new things coming in every year too. Yeah, we actually host 3. So the Expozine's a huge book fair, it's / zine fair, about 250 publishers each year. There's also a printed arts fair that we do mostly with the printed art artist-run centers, and an art book fair. And originally, and this is 26 years ago, when we started the organization, we decided to have a dual mandate: promote and preserve simultaneously. So we do feel responsible to, obviously, we host events. There's bands playing. We get a copy of their music. We record the events that we put on ourselves, and that's one way of keeping on top of that.
And also these people, as years go by, Exposine is turning 25 this year. I can't count how many people tabled at the fair and years later show up with a box of zines and these are sort of artifacts of my youth. I don't need them anymore, and I'm glad you guys are here and you could take all this. So there's a lot of, as far as recent stuff, if we're lucky, within 5 or 10 years of something having been a phenomenon, we'll start getting stuff in from people who might have been more connected and more on top of those things.
Very good. I see another question here on the Zoom chat from Rob. I'll read this. He writes, Chloe mentioned that some clubs have not been added, I guess, to the map because of lack of information. He mentions on the jazz side, L'Air du Temps and Claudia's were important in the 70s and 80s. Also on the rock side, the Mustache on what Old Anglo's called Classy, and the Rainbow Bar and Grill. Can you speak to what is missing to get them on the site, if you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, every name you just mentioned is definitely on our list. Yeah, there's lots on our list that we haven't put on the site, like the Ballatu. There's the Jazz Club, Ivan Simon's Jazz Club. A lot of places that either have come up in interviews. L'Air de Temps has come up a lot of times in our interviews. And yeah, I guess it's also just partly it's not having a ton of information on it, or not a ton of yeah, like
We're being a bit perfectionist.
we're being a bit perfectionist, and then also it's just a lot of work to be putting a lot of stuff onto the map, and so sometimes when we get really busy with other things, there's not a staff person to be doing that work.
Some of those are on our list. I
Yeah.
actually have 2 people who worked at the Rainbow that I'm hoping to meet up finally and interview in the coming months, and then add that. We had a rule of thumb where we wanted at least 1 actual photo
Yeah.
and 2 other things like a poster, a flyer, or an ad. We didn't want to just use a newspaper ad and whip up something on the map. But I think we might loosen that a little bit to get more stuff up, because then somebody might message and say, hey, I've got something. Ultimately, we'd like for, the Mustache is quite something. We have a bunch of material because it started as a folk club called Your Father's Mustache before being a metal club. The Rainbow is more of a rock club than anything else, but I think we're going to start to get more of that on there. And maybe we'll take a chance, and even if we have just 1 image of something and very little info, start putting more stuff up so that people can then show up and say, hey, yeah, well, I worked there, or my father worked there, and I do have some other material. Because ultimately we're kind of looking to, this is a more permanent and proper platform than the many nostalgic Montreal Facebook groups that I'm sure some of the people here follow those. They, on the one hand, seem amazing. Just today, not the Black Bottom, Alfie's popped up. Twice in the last 2 months, the Black Bottom popped up. But it was all like, hey, anybody remember the Black Bottom? And like 30 people like, oh, yeah, I went there, I saw this, I saw that. And then by the end of the day, that thing is like a mile down the feed. And they're very superficial kind of comments. We have not had much luck in getting people. I jump in all the time and say, hey, we're working on a project about this, and if you would like to chat. The other problem is people post photos galore and images in those Facebook groups, but no sign of who did it, who took that photo, no provenance, no detail of the kind that as a proper archive we would want before we put that on there. There's like archives that are essentially Facebook pages or people's personal blogs that don't have these kinds of concerns, and they're more like, we call them online harvesters. They'll gather up thousands of photos online and post them and talk about them, and that's great, but that's more of a, it's just sort of like a fan or amateur type thing, labor of love for some individual people. But we really would like to do it more properly. But what I would really hope is that rather than spending all that time on Facebook waxing nostalgic with each other, more and more people can do so in the comments section under some of these posts that we have, and that's definitely one of our goals is to try to get this.
Yeah, and now that we have the fancy new revamped map, I think we do want to kind of put some more love into it and put some more pins in there.
Jody just followed up there on your comment about these sort of Facebook groups, and yes, I follow a lot of them and I enjoy them. She says, I appreciate you speaking to the limitations of these Facebook area memory groups. Something most don't think about is the permanent recording of that information as well, which I guess is also a type of ephemera. And I think the problem for me is that, this is this data, once you put it on Facebook, belongs to a corporation, Meta, who are in the United States. And I just feel like, we have this sense that will always be there. There will always be a Facebook. There will always be this. But even these big mega corporate platforms don't live forever. Nor does anything, nor does any archive. But still, I think there is, when you're actually committed to this task of preserving it, there's something, you're coming at it from a different perspective than someone that's just harvesting data, or a corporation that's harvesting data. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. There is a misinformation out there that somehow when you post things to Facebook or interact on Facebook, that they then own all of that, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, they reserve the right to, put what you posted in someone else's feed or thing like that, but they don't end up with any actual rights to use or publish or take everyone's posts and do something else with it outside of their sandbox. So that's important to note. But there was potential there, but I don't know the way that's gone. Just last week, I know there was a Facebook post about the Black Bottom, and someone posted a photo of it, and then somebody popped in a thread saying, "Hey, nobody's giving me credit for that photo there." So then there's like, "Oh yeah, sorry," they credited him. And I was like, "Are you the photographer who took that photo?" I was like, "No, I'm the one who found it online, and they didn't credit me when they reposted it in the group." I was like, "Well, actually, that's from our blog that we put online. And we actually are trying to find out who that photographer is." But, I heard crickets after that. It was like sort of spoiling their fun. It's just not a great tool to foster further research. But who knows? Maybe some of these people, when I post to say, "Can you contact us, or can we talk about this further offline?" Might start getting more results. But it is what it is. I dream of a Canadian or some other non-American social media network where we could own the information and what they call portability, bring it with us to different platforms. Hopefully that will be the case within a few years.
Amen. That's a great place to wrap up. I want to thank you three for coming on tonight. Louis Rastelli, Chloe Martin, and Delilah Williams. Really fantastic discussion. Go check out their website, their blog. They also have a great YouTube page, especially if you're into like home movies and stuff like that. I had a lot of fun there the other week. So yeah, stay abreast of what they're doing. I think they have three more events coming up in the Montreal area as part of their ongoing Owning Our History series. I want to thank our sponsors once again, the Zeller Family Foundation and Canadian Heritage, for their support. All of our talks are archived on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. So if you want to share today's talk with friends or family, or perhaps you want to browse our back catalog of online heritage talks, we've been doing them mostly online for the past 4 years. We're now starting to do things in person more again. So finally, I want to thank everyone who joined us on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. We really appreciate your support and the lively discussion which you brought tonight. So our next Heritage Talk will be held in person at Caribbean Food Factory later this month on March 26th. The Caribbean Food Factory is in Montreal and NDG. It's near Vendôme Metro. So we'll be there with CKUT FM and DJ and MC Pat Dillon Moore. I saw a picture of her in tonight's presentation. So she'll be introducing us to the pioneers of Quebec steel pan music. These are people that brought steel pan here in Expo 67 from Trinidad and Tobago and elsewhere in the Caribbean. And then on April 9th, we're back on Zoom. We'll be joined by guests from Quebec's Lower North Shore, discussing the heritage of Ladies' Night square dances that celebrated the contribution of women in the fisheries, as well as the Feast of the Assumption. So finally, or in mid-April, April 16th, we'll be in person again, this time at the Black Watch Armory on Blurry Street with bagpipers Bruce Bolton and Gabriel Harris, who'll be sharing the history of the Great Highland bagpipes in this province since the 1750s, if you can imagine. So you can find more information about all our talks on Quan's website and Facebook page. That's all for us tonight. I want to wish you all a great evening, and we'll see you at the next Heritage Talk.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so
for
much.
Coming.
Don't be shy to come and visit or contact us. We're always open.
Thank you, you three.
Thank you.
We'll
Thanks, QHN.
see you around. Looking forward to the next in-person ARCMTL event. All right, have a good night, everyone. I'm going to roll the outro.
Thank you.
Okay.